Visualize it's 1997. You're walking through a graveyard of tech companies, and in the center of it all is a massive, crumbling monument, Apple Computer. At this moment, the company is a disaster. They are losing $1 billion a year. Their stock is trading at record lows. The boardroom is a battlefield of failed CEOs and desperate pivots. The industry consensus was clear. Apple was dead. Wired magazine famously ran a cover with the Apple logo wrapped in barbed wire and a single word as the headline, "Pray." Michael Dell, the titan of the PC industry at the time, was asked what he would do to fix Apple. He didn't hesitate. He said, "I'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders." Think about that for a second. The company that today defines our modern digital lives was essentially a bankrupt punchline. Fast forward to today. Apple isn't just a survivor, it is the most successful commercial entity in human history. It was the first to hit a $1 trillion valuation, then 2, then 3. Apple's cash reserves are often larger than the GDP of countries like New Zealand or Vietnam. It doesn't just sell phones, it dictates the rhythm of global culture. But here's the mystery that most people miss. Apple is rarely first. They didn't invent the MP3 player. They didn't invent the smartphone. They didn't invent the tablet or the smartwatch. In many cases, their hardware specs are actually inferior on paper compared to cheaper competitors. So, what is the secret? Is it just good marketing? No. There is a calculated, multi-layered business strategy at play. A strategy so effective it has rewritten the laws of capitalism. Today, we are going to dissect the secret strategy of the walled garden, the pivot to services, and the psychological lock-in that makes Apple the ultimate trillion-dollar empire. The story of the trillion-dollar strategy begins with a return. When Steve Jobs was brought back to Apple in 1997, he found a company that was trying to do everything and succeeding at nothing. Apple was selling dozens of different versions of the Macintosh. They had printers, digital cameras, and even handheld PDAs like the Newton. Jobs did something that would become the first pillar of the Apple strategy: radical simplification. He famously walked into a room, drew a simple 2x2 grid on a whiteboard, and said, "This is what we need. 2 columns, consumer and pro. 2 rows, desktop and portable." That was it. 4 products. By cutting 70% of the product line, Jobs didn't just save money. He consolidated Apple's greatest resource, focus. This is the secret strategy in its infancy. The realization that you don't need to win every market. You just need to own the best market. But as the 2000s began, Jobs realized a terrifying truth. The PC wars were over, and Microsoft had won. Windows was on 95% of the world's computers. Apple was a niche player for designers. If they stayed just a computer company, they would eventually be squeezed out of existence. This led to the digital hub strategy. Jobs envisioned the Mac not as a standalone machine, but as the center of a new digital lifestyle. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod. This was the turning point. The iPod wasn't just a great music player, it was the birth of vertical integration. Most tech companies at the time were horizontal. Microsoft made software that ran on anyone's hardware. Creative and Rio made MP3 players that ran anyone's software. Jobs hated this. He believed that to create a perfect user experience, you had to control the whole widget. You had to build the hardware, the operating system, and the application. When Apple launched iTunes, they didn't just give you a place to buy music. They gave you the only software that talked perfectly to the iPod. If you bought a song on iTunes, it worked best on an iPod. If you had an iPod, you needed a Mac to manage it. The walled garden had its first brick laid. Apple realized that by controlling the hardware-software link, they could create a frictionless experience that Windows users, who were constantly dealing with driver errors and third-party software crashes, could only dream of. This wasn't just about design, it was about building a system where every piece of the puzzle was owned by Apple. Now we get into the dark magic of the Apple strategy. As the iPhone arrived in 2007, the strategy shifted from building great products to building an ecosystem. In business school, they call this switching costs. A switching cost is the price, in time, money, or psychological stress, that a customer pays to move from one brand to another. Most companies try to keep switching costs low to attract new customers. Apple did the opposite. They made the cost of leaving so high that quitting Apple feels like moving to a new country and learning a new language. Think about the blue bubble phenomenon. To the uninitiated, iMessage is just a messaging app. But for Apple, it's a massive strategic moat. By keeping iMessage exclusive to Apple devices, they created a social hierarchy. They purposefully didn't adopt universal messaging standards for years, meaning that if you're on Android, your videos are blurry and your group chats break. In many social circles, particularly among younger generations, switching to Android isn't just a tech choice, it's a social risk. But it's not just social pressure, it's continuity. Have you ever marveled at how your AirPods automatically switch from your iPhone to your Mac? Or how you can copy a link on your phone and paste it on your iPad? This is the magic of the ecosystem. On the surface, it's a wonderful convenience. Beneath the surface, it's a trap. Every time you buy a new Apple product, the walls of the garden get higher. If you own an iPhone, buying an Apple Watch is a no-brainer because it works so seamlessly. But once you own an iPhone and an Apple Watch, the cost of switching to a Google Pixel doubles. Now you have to replace two devices. If you also have a MacBook and an iPad, switching to a PC means you lose handoff, you lose iCloud keychain, and you lose AirDrop. Apple's secret strategy is to make their products talk to each other in a way that no other company can. Because Samsung doesn't make Windows and Google doesn't make Dell laptops, they can never achieve the same level of harmony that Apple provides. Then there is the data. iCloud is perhaps the most effective lock-in tool ever created. When your entire digital life, 15 years of photos, every password you own, every backup of your messages, is stored in Apple's proprietary cloud, leaving becomes a nightmare. Moving 500 gigabytes of data from iCloud to Google Drive is a slow, manual, and terrifying process for the average user. Most people look at that mountain of work and simply say, "I'll just buy the next iPhone." Apple has successfully turned convenience into dependency. They don't have to win you over every year with a revolutionary new phone. They just have to keep the garden comfortable enough that you never want to look for the exit. If Steve Jobs was the architect who built the garden, Tim Cook is the master gardener who learned how to monetize every single blade of grass. When Cook took over in 2011, skeptics thought Apple would stagnate without Jobs' visionary leaps. But Cook was playing a different game. He understood something Jobs didn't fully exploit: the power of services. In the hardware business, you are only as good as your last launch. If the iPhone 15 doesn't sell well, revenue craters. Cook wanted to turn Apple into a utility. He wanted Apple to be like the electric company, something you pay every month without thinking about it. This led to the services pivot: Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple News, and most importantly, iCloud Plus. Look at the numbers. Hardware margins are good, usually around 35%. But services? The margins on Apple services are estimated to be over 70%. Once the infrastructure is built, every extra dollar is pure profit. Apple now makes more money from services alone than most Fortune 500 companies make in total. But Cook's masterstroke was the Apple Silicon transition. For years, Apple relied on Intel for Mac processors. In 2020, Apple cut the cord and designed their own M-series chips. This was a tectonic shift. By owning the brain of the computer, Apple achieved a level of performance-to-power efficiency that Intel couldn't touch. But more importantly, it closed the final door in the garden. Apple Silicon made it so that the Mac, the iPhone, and the iPad all speak the exact same language. You can now run iPhone apps on your Mac. The integration is complete. Cook also refined Apple's supply chain into a weapon. He reduced Apple's inventory from months to days. He forced suppliers to compete for Apple's massive contracts, ensuring that Apple gets the best components at the lowest prices. Apple's strategy is a pincer movement. On one side, they have the highest profit margins. On the other, they have the most efficient supply chain in the world. All the efficiency and software lock-in doesn't explain the soul of Apple's success. Why do people wait in line for 12 hours for a phone? Why do people put Apple stickers on their cars? This is the psychological pillar, the luxury of belonging. Apple has pulled off the greatest branding trick in history. They have convinced the world that they are a luxury brand that is also accessible. In economics, there are Veblen goods. Usually when price goes up, demand goes down. But for a Veblen good, like a Rolex, the high price is why people want it. It's a status symbol. Apple isn't quite a Veblen good, but they use premium pricing to create a sense of value. They never participate in race to the bottom pricing. You will never see a budget iPhone that feels cheap. Even their entry-level products are priced slightly higher than the competition. Why? Because Apple isn't selling specs. They are selling an identity. The Think Different campaign wasn't about computers. It was about telling the customer that by buying an Apple product, they were a rebel, an artist, a crazy one. Today that has evolved. Now buying an Apple product signals that you are successful and integrated. Apple's retail stores are designed like cathedrals. The glass stairs and open spaces are meant to make you feel like you aren't shopping, but participating in something elite. This emotional connection creates a halo effect. When Apple releases a new product, customers don't ask, "Is this better than the competition?" They ask, "When can I get the Apple version of this?" They have successfully decoupled their brand from cold tech specs. You don't buy an iPhone because it has 8 gigabytes of RAM. You buy it because it's an iPhone. This brand loyalty is a moat that no amount of advertising budget from competitors can bridge. It is the ultimate strategy, making the customer feel that by leaving the brand, they are losing a part of their identity. So, how did Apple become a trillion-dollar company? It wasn't a single invention. It was a 25-year masterclass in strategic alignment. They simplified to survive, integrated hardware and software to own the experience, built a walled garden to ensure customers stayed, pivoted to services for high-margin revenue, and wrapped it all in a luxury brand identity. As we look toward the future, the garden is getting smarter. With Apple Intelligence and the Vision Pro, Apple is building walls around our very perception of reality. However, the fortress is under attack. Governments are looking at the walled garden and asking if it's a monopoly. They are forcing Apple to allow third-party app stores and universal charging ports. The question for the next decade is, can Apple maintain its dominance if the walls of the garden are torn down? Or is the experience so good that even if the gates are left wide open, no one will actually choose to leave? Apple's secret strategy has been the most successful business play in history. They didn't just build a company, they built a digital reality. Whether that's a masterpiece of convenience or a golden cage is up to you to decide. But one thing is certain, the company that was 90 days from death didn't just come back to life. It took over the world. I want to hear from you. Look at your desk or in your pocket right now. How many Apple products do you own? And more importantly, if you were offered a better phone for half the price tomorrow, would you actually switch? Is the Blue Bubble or your iCloud library enough to keep you locked in forever? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. Do you think Apple's strategy is brilliant or anti-competitive? If you found this deep dive helpful, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this kind of documentary content is worth sharing. And if you want to see more breakdowns of the secret strategies behind the world's most powerful companies, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.